Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tado Jayantiraya Naishtapraya Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So, after a little gap, we are starting our class again on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Das Goswami, chapter 37, volume 1, or volume 2, I don't know, it's in folio. So, let's see. Not only did Bhaktivinoda Thakur document Navdeep's past glory, but he also foresaw its glorious future. So, Prabhupada is trying to get land in Navdeep. So, Maharaj is talking about Navdeep a little bit. When a religion based on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya would emerge and special throughout the world and spread throughout the world, and when European and American Vaishnavas would throng to Navdeep to join the Bengali brothers in chanting Jai Sachinanda, the time would come, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote, when in the land of Navdeep, on the plain of the Ganges, a magnificent temple would arise, proclaiming to the world the glories of Lord Chaitanya. Yes, this was his prediction, and there is a house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur across Jalangi River, which is one part of tributary of Ganga from Navdeep or Mayapur. So in that house, Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to live, and he was a high court, he was a judge, he was a very high-ranking officer. And in that house, it is said, him, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, because it was his son, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj and Jagannath Das Babaji, they would meet at that house. And they would look towards Mayapur. And they would say, one day, a very magnificent temple would arise in this place, to proclaiming to the world the glories of Lord Chaitanya. So this was the dream project of Srila Prabhupada. He established Mayapur temple, but this magnificent temple that is being constructed now, he gave the orders to his disciples, especially Ambarish Prabhu, to build this magnificent temple, because this was a dream of all of our acharyas, especially Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, carrying out the desires of his father and preceptor, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, had formed the Gaudiya Math for propagating the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the glories of Navdeep Dham. He had induced a wealthy disciple to spend his fortune for erecting a temple at Lord Chaitanya's birth site in Mayapur. And he had constructed a Kirtan hall commemorating the place of Lord Chaitanya's Kirtans. He had also constructed his own residence in Mayapur. He had built temples throughout India, 64 in all. But because he wanted the English-speaking world, especially, to take to Lord Chaitanya's movement, he had emphasized as first priority the publishing and distribution of Krishna-conscious literature. So Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj constructed the temple at Yogpit, where Lord Chaitanya appeared. And he has made this, as mentioned here, big Kirtan hall. So yes, it is a pretty big Kirtan hall there. Srila Prabhupada, sitting in his room in the Calcutta temple, shared the great vision of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Yet to enact this great vision, he had to take practical steps, and he was content to take them in the most humble way. A devotee should not simply daydream, expecting Krishna to accomplish everything with miracles. Prabhupada, however, was not dreaming idly. Working for years alone in India, he had held his plan of going to the West, and Krishna had at last fulfilled that desire. In America, in whatever circumstances and with whatever small facility Krishna had provided, he had preached, and slowly, step by step, he had met with success, realizing his vision of a worldwide society of devotees. Always he had kept his great vision in mind, as every step forward had given him deeper satisfaction and had brought him closer to the fulfillment of his mission. Prabhupada sometimes told the glory of a poor potter who dreamed of expanding his business and becoming fabulously rich. As the potter slept one night, he dreamed of how much land and how many houses he would have, and of how he would have a beautiful wife. When the potter considered that perhaps a wife would quarrel with him, he became angry and said, if my wife fights with me, I'll kick her. And kicking, he broke the only two parts in his stock and was reduced to nothing. So that was not how Prabhupada was working, but this is the daydream people have. And then they lose everything. But we got to be practical, and Prabhupada was very practical. Whether chanting or writing or reading or preaching, Prabhupada had been absorbed in his plans for spreading Krishna consciousness and fulfilling the dream of the past acharyas. Now he was anxious to complete the next step, and for this he was waiting up past midnight, meditating on his two disciples and their important mission. So these two disciples, Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bali Mardhan, they had gone to Mayapur to finalize the transaction of land, to finalize the paperwork. As Prabhupada sat, wrapped in thought, the only sounds were the usual sounds of the night. Mice within the walls, a brahmachari snoring on the veranda, and in the distance, the night watchman making his rounds, his stick striking the street. There were no cars, and only an occasional wooden rickshaw clattered along the potholed street. Prabhupada wondered if perhaps his boys had been robbed. Before sending them off, he had shown Tamal Krishna how to carry money around his waist in a makeshift cloth money belt. But it had been a great deal of money, and robberies were not uncommon around Navadvip. Or perhaps there had been some other delay. Sometimes in land negotiations involving large sums of money, the court would require that a clerk record the denomination and serial number of every note exchanged. Or perhaps the train had broken down. Suddenly, Prabhupada heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone opened the outer door and now walked along the veranda just outside. A soft knock. Yes, who is it? Prabhupada asked. Tamal Krishna entered and prostrated himself before Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada asked, what is your news? Tamal Krishna looked up triumphantly. The land is yours. Prabhupada leaned back with a sigh. All right, he said, now you can take rest. So this is how anxious Prabhupada was to get this piece of land in Mayapur and to build a temple, magnificent temple, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. London, August 1971. Prabhupada had asked the Indian High Commissioner for the United Kingdom to petition Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to attend ISKCON's upcoming cornerstone laying ceremony in Mayapur. Already Prabhupada had instructed all his GVC secretaries to attend the ceremony, and he had asked the devotees to invite many prominent citizens of Calcutta. Writing to his disciples in India, he said that if they could not get Indira Gandhi to come, they should at least get the Governor of Bengal, Sri S.S. Dhawan. Meanwhile, Prabhupada was meeting in London as several of his disciples experienced in architecture and design. He wanted them to design plans for his Mayapur project. Nar Narayan had built Rath Yatra carts and designed temples' interiors. Ranchor had studied architecture, and Bhavananda had been a professional designer. But Prabhupada himself conceived the plans for the Mayapur building. He then told his three-man committee to provide sketches and an architect's model. He would immediately begin raising funds and securing support in India for the project. To devotees who heard Prabhupada's plans, this seemed the most ambitious ISKCON project ever. See, he had to raise funds, secure support. Support means both political and otherwise, industrialist. It's not just a simple thing. And at the same time, he had to keep on traveling, preaching, writing his commentaries, training his disciples. It's amazing what he did. While taking his morning walks in Russell Square, Prabhupada would point to various buildings and ask how high they were. Finally, he announced one morning that the main temple in Mayapur should be more than 300 feet high. Mayapur's monsoon floods and sandy soil would create unique difficulties, he said, and the building would have to be built on the special foundation, a sort of floating raft. A civil engineer later confirmed this. Prabhupada didn't have any civil engineering degree, but this is what he said. This is how, because the sandy soil, this is how buildings are built over there, on a raft foundation. The first building, Prabhupada said, should be a large guest house, 4 stories high, and is designed, although not strictly conforming to any school of architecture, resembled most that of Rajasthan. He wanted a pink and rust-colored building with many arches and a wide marble veranda on each floor except the ground floor. The building should run east-west, so the sun would pass lengthwise over it and not shine directly into the building's broad front. Southerly breezes would cool the guest house in summer. The building should be equipped with electric fans and lights, modern toilets and showers, and the rooms should be furnished, spacious, and well ventilated. This guest house should be built as soon as possible, Prabhupada said. Then other buildings would follow. He wanted residential buildings of 500 devotees, a large prasadam hall seating several thousand, a kitchen complex, and a goshala, shelter for the cows that would pasture in nearby fields. In time, ISKCON would acquire adjoining land and develop parks with flower gardens, trees, shrubs, fountains, walkways, and arbors. So this building, the guest house building, running east-west, and Prabhupada called it long building, and it is still called long building. So yes, it's a long building, and probably at that time it was the longest building in the whole of West Bengal. But this was his vision for Mayapur. He wanted more land to be acquired and develop parks, flower gardens, and so on. The main building, the colossal Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, was to be no less than 300 feet high and costing perhaps tens of millions of dollars. Prabhupada's description astounded the architects as well as the devotees. It sounded greater than the United States Capitol or St. Peter's Cathedral. The temple's central dome would house a 3-dimensional model of the universe. The design, however, would be based on the Vedic description and would depict not only the material universe, but also the spiritual universe. So the temple's central dome would house a 3-dimensional model of the universe. So this is what Prabhupada wanted, and this is how, well, the temple is being built. It hasn't not opened yet, but then in the central dome, space is maintained, kept for this model of the universe with the whole 14 planetary systems, and then the spiritual world shown. It'll be very descriptive and very detailed. I don't know, is it going to be a static or a revolving thing? I don't know yet. Earlier they were talking about revolving, but then there were some practical issues, so not sure what is the resolution now. Entering the main hall, a person would look up and see the planets situated just as Srimad Bhagavatam describes, beginning with the hellish planets, then the middle planets, wherein the earth is situated, then the heavenly planets of the demigods, and then Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the material world. Above Brahmaloka, the observer would see the abode of Lord Shiva, and above that, the spiritual sky of Brahmjyoti. Within the spiritual effulgence of the Brahmjyoti would be the self-illuminating Vaikuntha planets, inhabited by eternally liberated souls. And highest of all would be the supreme planet of Krishna Loka, where God in his original eternal form enjoys his pastimes with his most confidential devotees. The temple would also house a miniature palace in which the deities of Radha and Krishna would reside, surrounded by skills and pillars of silver, gold, and jewels. Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir and the Mayapur city would be ISKCON's world headquarters. So that was the plan, and this is how it's being developed. And why such a fabulous architectural wonder as this in such an obscure part of the world? The answer Prabhupada explained was that Mayapur was actually not obscure. It seemed so only from the mundane perspective. To mundane vision, that which was central seemed remote. The soul and the next life seemed remote, while the body and immediate sense gratification seemed central. By establishing the temple of human understanding in Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada would be directing the materialistic world's attention back to the true center. So, yes, as Prabhupada said, Mayapur is not an obscure. It might be to the mundane eyes right now, but this is how he wanted the temple to develop, and, um, and so that people from all over the world, not just the devotees would go anywhere. The people would should come and study the universe and appreciate Mahaprabhu's vision, Sankirtan movement, and he wanted to give them every facility, like car parking, bus parking, the restaurants, the guest houses, the tours, and this and that. And that's how people would come. If it was a small temple, why would they come from all over the world? But this was Prabhupada's vision, so sure it would happen. Any sincere visitor would be charmed by the beauty of ISKCON's Mayapur project and would perceive that here indeed was a spiritual world. And the devotees living in Mayapur, by remaining constantly immersed in singing Hare Krishna Kirtan and discussing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, would be able to convince any intelligent visitor that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were the highest truth. The devotees would explain the philosophy of the absolute truth, which would enable visitors to comprehend actual spiritual truth beyond sectarian religious dogma. Furthermore, the continuous Hare Krishna Kirtan and the blissful devotees engaged in a wide variety of services to Lord Krishna would demonstrate that Bhakti Yoga was the simplest, most direct process for meditating on the Supreme Personality of God. While staying in ISKCON's Mayapur city, a person would quickly become a devotee of the Lord and begin chanting and dancing in ecstasy. So this was the whole plan, to bring people, make them really fall in love with the awe and glory of Mayapur, ISKCON Mayapur. And then the devotees would be there to preach. Devotees are there serving, so they should impress. And the person should take up chanting and dancing in ecstasy. Srila Prabhupada was demonstrating how the world could be spiritualized by linking material things with the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna through Bhakti Yoga. And why shouldn't such spiritual feats surpass the achievements of the materialists? So materialistically, we have seen so many buildings, so many achievements, and so many other projects all over the world. And people do get impressed by that. Bigger the project, it impresses people. So why not temple? Just like when Yudhishthira Maharaj performed the Rajsuya Yajna, his point was, in Bhagavatam it is mentioned, his point was, and it was very elaborate yajna. Krishna himself was present and he was taking care of feeding the sadhus and picking up, not just feeding, picking up the pattals after they've eaten and serving the sadhus. This was Krishna doing. But Yudhishthira Maharaj, he said, I am doing this yajna, such an elaborate, expensive yajna, to prove to the world that devotee of Krishna can do anything to glorify Krishna. It wasn't for his own pleasure, but to show to the world that he is the emperor. No, it was to glorify Krishna. And this is how Prabhupada also wanted, to glorify Krishna. Okay, I guess we can stop and see anybody has any questions or comments.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna, thank you,
Yes,
Prabhupada.
yes, Mata. Thank you. Chalo, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna.
Next trip to Mayapur, Prabhupada.
Yeah, I want to go. Let's see.
Yes, yes. Make a plan. जरूर जाएंगे हम लोग.
Chalo, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.